Okay, mic test. So this is working. Okay, it has been ages since we, um, hung out on stream. Yeah, so I just thought I would, um, just take this time to stream a bit, catch up with everything we've missed, and yeah, just hang out really. Um, yeah, hold up, let me get this. It's been a while since I streamed. Everything is kind of messy. I don't really remember how I used to manage this. So just give me a minute to figure this out. Um, yeah, I remember you could kind of like pop this out. There we go. Okay, so I'll just move this here. If there's anything during the stream, just stop me. Um, leave a chat or all of that stuff. All of that stuff. Yeah. So today's pretty good. If you are on Discord, then you probably have been getting these annoying release notes. Yeah, work on leave never actually stopped. I just really couldn't keep up with like community stuff. Um, yeah, all of that. But yeah, it's good to be back. Good to be back. Good to finally have a stream on. But yeah, let's just jump into it. All of the new stuff in Leaf. And I don't really have a list here, so I'm just going to go with the updates I made to the documentation. So we'll try and kind of like trace back all of the releases from there. Okay, so let me just kind of like wind this back a bit. Let's see, September. I think our last stream was somewhere maybe July, no June. Yeah, so there's quite a lot of things here. Okay, so let's start from here. Okay, so I think one thing we never really added to the okay, like winding that back up. I think at the beginning of the year I mentioned that we'd be doing a lot of integrations with third party um third party applications and stuff like that. I don't remember which episode that was, but then um and then having some kind of like monitoring service like maybe Sentry. We didn't have anything like that. So I added this little guide here. I think if you go to learn, um, where that okay, it's right here. There we go. So we added a little guide for Sentry. So you can just follow this at the Sentry SDK and basically just catch every error in your app. So you can just try catch this and then sort of shoot that to Sentry. So that was a little guide I added. Um, so I personally used this and it's been pretty good. Um, should probably add some more support for this, but then everything goes through Leaf for an application. So if there's any error anywhere, even on the Leaf level, it shoots it right into Sentry. So Um, if you ever really wondered how you could monitor your Leaf applications, this is one of the best ways to do it. So this this particular guide works for the application itself. So if you have like console errors, it doesn't catch it. If you want to catch console errors, you'd have to do this same thing, but then inside the Leaf file in um, Leaf MVC if you're using Leaf MVC. That would probably be like right here somewhere. So in this leaf file, you could try catch this block. So leaf call load console, and they'll be pretty much the same. But then this here with the public index.php, that's for only the core level of your application. Okay. So that's with the Sentry stuff. Um, yeah, there's not much of a setup you need to do. There's a Sentry DSN you can copy and paste right here, and then that's pretty much all you need to do. There's not much. There's actually really not much to do over here. So that was one. That was one. Let's see, quite a lot of things here. I think we've actually done quite a number of them, surprisingly. Um, yeah, I think um I'll just use this list right here, and then we can continue working through this. So that was for monitoring. There was another for tracking, which I actually don't remember. Track data in your application. Isn't that just the Sentry stuff? Um, oh no, okay. So tracking data in your application is usually done with something like Google Analytics or Mixpanel. So um, if you have a kind of application where you need to track what your users are doing, um, like maybe you want to know how users interact with your application, like they move from this page to that page, they click on this button, like that kind of stuff. You go with like Google Analytics, Mixpanel, or other third-party providers. I think this guide is for Mixpanel, if I remember right. So it walks you through setting up Mixpanel. Okay, I guess it's for both Google Analytics and Mixpanel. So this works with inertia, works the same way with Blade or pretty much any templating engine you use. You just need to put in the head, like your head tag. And then if there's any server-side setup you need to do, for instance, with Mixpanel, you have to set up their server-side SDK. So if you install Mixpanel, and then you need to set up. Technically, you don't need to do this, but then this just makes it a whole lot easier, basically. The idea is if you register the Mixpanel SDK, you can basically call it from anywhere in your application. So all that we're doing here is calling the leaf instance and then just sticking this Mixpanel object over there. So that's kind of like all you need to do. And then from there, you'll be able to track something, like basically anything at all. So if there's like a button click, you can Mixpanel track, button click, stuff like that. That's kind of the idea. Again, this is not like a leaf feature. That's why it's all part of the lens section of the documentation. Um, yeah, I wonder if I am breaking or anything. Okay, doesn't look like it. So guess I'm good. Okay. Um, right. So yeah, this guide has everything you need for tracking stuff. So yeah, Amplitude was another one I forgot. But basically they all work the same. And then this is for like server-side events. So I guess they are pretty solid. Yeah, so this is kind of stuff not on the framework level, but then they just made sense to other because someone might need them. So if you want to, like monitor stuff, yeah, we'll definitely do this New Relic Datadog, like actual monitoring later. And then if you want to track what your users are actually doing in your application, yes, the guide you can kind of follow. Um, let's see, what else was added? So that's for like tracking, Sentry stuff. Let's see, what else, what else, what else, what else? Okay, so this is all scheduling, job scheduling. Okay, so this has to do with jobs. So by the way, this is all about the Wait, I think there were a few more guides I added. Um, yeah, so there were some new deployment guides, what to do, what not to do. I think a few providers. Um, yeah, and then basically bundling your front end. So if you are using V, um, inertia, or just V, like just maybe Tailwind CSS with Blade, or just using JavaScript, um, TypeScript or something, and you want to bundle it for production. So there's a mini guide over here. Yeah, so basically, it would work fine anyway, but if you're using inertia and you don't bundle your application for production, you might end up running into course errors and stuff like that. So it's always better to just bundle your code. And then there's a guide for queues and workers, which is actually what we're going to talk about next. So you can kind of offload stuff to the background, let a worker pick it up, and then handle them for you. This guide here talks about how to deploy your queues. So if you're using queues, you can deploy them following this guide. It's a pretty straightforward guide and uses supervisor so that if your workers end up crashing, you can kind of like restart them, and stuff like that, basically. So that's the idea. So there were a few more guides added here, and now we can actually talk about queues. So queues have been in Leaf MVC for a bit. Actually, they're only supported by Leaf MVC. They are not supported by like just core Leaf. At least not yet. We plan to add support pretty soon. Um, yeah, but um, long story about queues. They basically just have three parts. You have the queue, you have the job, which is whatever task you are going to run, and then you have the worker that basically, looks into the queue, sees if there's any job to run, and then actually runs it. Um, so the part about deployment focused on the worker, which is like the third thing. Um, yeah. So whenever um you want to push anything to the background for Leaf to handle, you create a job for that. And you can create a job using the G job command and then the name of the job. The job is just a class, by the way. It has a handle method, which is whatever code you want to run. And then you dispatch the job using dispatch, which is a global function. But then that's only available if you actually install Q, the Leaf install Q, and then you just magically get the commands plus the dispatch thing. So this has been in Leaf for quite a bit. But then the new thing here is none of this, none of this. The new stuff here is scheduling jobs. Okay, so usually you use something like a cron job. Um, you start a cron server, and then that actually handles your scheduling. Which is I would not say it's a lot of work, but then it's pretty annoying because that's like a separate thing. The fun new thing is Leaf now supports scheduling directly inside jobs. So if you take a job like this, which is kind of like a regular job, handle function here calls admin mailer somewhere. Basically sends an application report to some admin somewhere. You might want to schedule this for a specific time, and now you can do that using this schedule function. So you basically call, you just create a schedule function, and then you can add your schedule here. So every week on Tuesday at 8 a.m., and Leaf will just automatically pick this up, create a schedule for it, and then when it's Tuesday at 8 a.m., it will just run it. You don't need to do any other configuration. It just does everything for you. So you don't even actually have to manage any additional server stuff. It just works with the regular queue worker, which was the deployment thing we saw earlier. It just works with that. So you don't need to do any other configuration. It just automatically handles the scheduling and then all of that stuff. So it just works really. So it supports this syntax where you have like this every week on maybe Monday at that time, or you can just use the regular cron syntax. So whichever is easier for you, you can just go with that. Um, and then the entire documentation for queues has kind of like been updated as well. So there was maybe missing information that's been filled now. Yeah, so that's a new cool thing about queues. You can now just schedule your jobs to run at a specific time. So if you schedule a job to run at a specific time, you don't need to dispatch the job manually. So you don't need to call dispatcher with like the job name anywhere. It will just work. So yeah. Um yeah, that's it with queues. That was kind of like the new thing. So scheduling docs. And then next is our bucket stuff. So this was another thing I said would be added, which was support for like bucket. What do you even call those? Um, External storage. Let's just say. So now if you're using Leaf FS, where would that be? Utilities somewhere file system. Yeah, so you're using the Leaf file system. Um, you can now kind of replace stuff. So for instance, file upload. This is the regular way to do file upload. It uses your the current storage, your disk, basically your storage disk. What would that even be? Like local storage, let's just call it file storage. Yeah. So it uses your file system as a storage. Now you can upload whatever file. So same syntax, you can upload to an S3 bucket or any S3 supported syntax. So that includes like Cloudflare and other S3 compatible storages. So usually you would have like the local path here. So request upload the file you want to the file you want to upload, and then the path. Now you just add with bucket, and that's basically it. So the syntax hasn't changed. There's no change in syntax. You just need to wrap the path in with bucket. Um, yeah. So that's kind of like all you need to do to actually switch from um file storage to um an S3 bucket of some sort. So that works with upload, it works with create file, and a few other methods. We're still working on making it like a one-to-one thing. So you could just take any random function here, add with the bucket, and then it'll just work. So that's kind of like the end goal. But we don't have that working just yet. Um, yeah, but basically it works right now. You just need to add your configuration. Best way to do that is with your environment files. But if you want to, you can PHP leave. I think it's like storage. Is it storage? No, config publish fs. I think to publish the actual configuration for this, and then you can tweak it from there. Yeah. So that's kind of how this works. Add your credentials, and then you can use with bucket. So that's kind of new, I guess. It's not exactly new, but um, it wasn't covered in documentation earlier. And then another new thing, this time for Leaf Auth, we have extensive support for what do you call that? We have extensive support for Auth. Um, so we shipped an initial version of this, which was actually pretty cool. But then this takes it to another level. Where do we even find auth doc? Probably maybe login, sign up. No idea. Okay, let's try this guy. Yeah, signing in from auth. So yeah, we've added um a whole lot more here. So the idea with this is you can use any league supported package. So there's the PHP League. This is probably going to burn my eyes, but yeah. The PHP League, they have a bunch of like auth clients which you can use: Facebook, GitHub, Google, Instagram, all of that stuff. And they have like third-party providers too. So basically, any league provider, you can install that and then just add your environment or initialize the league package. So there's an example of using any provider. Of course, Google is the most common OAuth provider, so we have like special support for Google. But then if you are using any league package, it would look something like this. So just initialize it, call auth with provider, and then from there you can use that provider anywhere in your application. The auth client, GitHub. If you're using like the Facebook one, you can just register it as Facebook and then basically do anything from there. So the way it works is you actually don't even remember, but basically you get the URL or something like that, sign in, and then from there you can grab the logged in user from the OAuth stuff and then save it directly this way. So that's basically how it works. It's pretty much this covers it. This covers it. Any league package you install would have its own documentation as well. You probably wouldn't need it, but yeah, that's how it works. So if you have kind of like a DB that has the password field required, you can just pass in a random string. Okay, my camera is kind of going to die soon. I have no idea where my charger is. Well, um, anyway, yeah, so you can just pass in a random string like this. Don't worry about security, leave auto take care of it, all of that. So, yeah. Okay, let's see. So that's how auth works basically. And then from there, after calling from auth, which is basically this, you pass in the results from the sign in, as in like whatever fields you want to save in your database. And then yeah, it's same old leave auth from there. So if not success, you can auth errors, or if it's successful, you call auth user to get a currently logged in user. Yeah. So that's kind of how this works. This is not new. I should have removed the new tag, but that's there's extensive support for auth now, and that's how it looks like. Um, Yeesh. Let's see. I kind of had that working. I think it's kind of in like my register controller or something like that. Don't really remember. But basically, as I said, we do something and then yeah. So we call auth client. So that's like a lead client. Probably just make this full screen. So we call a lead client to get authorization URL, and then that gives us the Google signing with Google link. And then from there, we can basically handle the Google Auth. And then if it's successful, we redirect to, all of that stuff. So it's just regular authentication from there. The goal with like Leaf Auth is to um, kind of make things similar. So whether using OAuth or regular auth, you use the same functions: auth user, auth errors, all of that stuff. Um, so that's kind of it. So if you already use Leaf Auth, there's nothing to learn. There's one new function, and then a bunch of league packages are available to you, just like that. So, okay. Verify email. There was this thing with leave, where you could kind of just generate a token. Let's generate verification token or something like that. Yeah. So leave gives you a JWT, which you can basically use for anything you want. And then you can verify that user. The problem here was verifying token wasn't giving you the user in question. That's been fixed now. So every time you call auth verify, if it's successful, you get the user back, and not like the currently logged in user, but then the user in that token. Kind of. Yeah, that's how it works. So that was kind of, it wasn't a bug per se, but then it made things difficult. Um, so you have the user now, and verification is a whole lot easier. So that was what that was about. Um, okay, that's quite a lot of things here. Okay, so next we have shared props from inertia. Um, hmm. Okay, so let's take a look at that. Um, inertia, that'll be on the front end. There we go. Okay. So if you are new to inertia, it lets you use your favorite front end tech. So React, Vue, Svelte. You can use any of them directly in your Leaf applications. So they replace Blade or Bare UI or any template engine you're using. It kind of like replaces it with React, Vue, or Svelte. That's kind of the idea. Um, so new things, you have shared props. Um, they were actually, for some reason, they were actually in the original inertia package. So I wonder how come they were not in the inertia package. But anyway, they've been added. The idea with shared props is if you have a ton of pages, which I do, I have like a whole lot of pages basically. You can share props. So by the way, backing up a bit, props are basically just data you share from your server side to your front end. So in templating engine terms, I mean, it would probably be like your template value. Um, Front end frameworks call them props. So you can set these props and they would basically be shared with every single page. So Leaf will just automatically pick them up and then throw them in whatever page is currently loaded on the screen. That's the idea. So you can use static values. So there's a constant value. It doesn't change, which is kind of why you use a string here. But if you have some async value, deferred value, or something like flash messages, so flash messages can be viewed only once. So once you call flash display, it's gone. If you try to get the same flash message, um, it will return null basically. So if you have something like that or async data, you can just wrap it in a function. So it won't actually get called until the page is being rendered. So you get to preserve everything. So yeah, it supports both static values, async values, and then values that should be deferred till runtime. So that's shared props. So it'll basically be passed to every single page. So whenever a page is displayed, these props will be there. So yeah, that means you don't have to like manually pass them every time you call response inertia or something like that. Okay. Um, there was one more thing. Um, there was one more thing which kind of was documented. I don't remember where. There we go. So automatic props. Every time you call a page, some values automatically pass down from leaf. So you have your entire auth context. It gives you the user, as in like the currently logged in user. It gives you the user ID. If there are any auth errors, it throws them in there as well. Roles, permissions, if you have subscriptions, the subscription you're currently on. That's from billing, by the way. So if you're using Leaves billing library, they'll just throw those into the user. So it's kind of like they are conditional. So it's not like you have all of them. If they are available, you would have them. And then some of them are from modules like this has subscription. The subscription itself is on trial. Those are from Leaf Billing. So if you're using like Leaf Stripe library or Leaf Stack library, and you have a subscription, then you'd probably see them there. Um, these are from I don't remember, but basically roles permission stuff. I don't think that's a separate library. So yeah, if you have Leaf or Field, you'd probably have them if you are using roles and permission. So everything here is conditional. This is the default flush message. So if you just do like a flush set, I think, this will pop up over there. And then sessions, excluding like hidden data, flash messages, all of that stuff. And then a billing context. So the available billing tiers. If you're using like again Stripe with subscriptions, you would have all of your subscriptions here. I mean like all available subscriptions and then the billing period, so yearly, monthly, that kind of stuff. Okay, I will kind of hide this now. I think my device is dead. Probably going to look for my charger later, but anyway. Um, yeah, so everything here is conditional. You won't have all of them unless you are actually using every single thing here. So yeah, these are just passed down for you if you're using inertia. So you can consider them as shared probes, but then automatically done for you. So you don't have to manually pass in like on every request, you pass in user and then pull it down from here. It's just already there for you. Um, so yeah, those were the inertia updates. So pretty cool new stuff for inertia. Leaf request got IPs, kind of like extended IP support. Um, where is that? Okay, so request response. So that's client's IP and geolocation. Basically, you can request get IP, and it gives you the IP of the current request. One thing you should be careful about is if you're using like load balancers or all of those complicated stuff, you might get the IP of like whatever proxy it is. Sometimes you might get the IP of your front end server. So like those are things you should be careful of. But then basically it gives you the IP associated with whoever request you're using. And then based on that IP, you can call get user location to give you like the current geolocation of that IP. So it gives you stuff like this. Or you can get location from IP and then like manually pass in the IP. So it still gives you all of this stuff. And it uses IP API, which is kind of free, I think. I mean, it's pretty free. Yeah. So yeah, this is kind of like my approximate information. Yeah. So that's kind of like what you get. Okay. So this is useful again for tracking. Um yeah, but then can be used for other stuff. Um but then just a side note, it's not exactly precise, which is why I said approximate location. So if you like need a very precise location, you should probably look for a different implementation because this is just approximate, not um it's not very accurate. Like if you're looking for maybe a city, you probably get that, but then if you want an exact location, it's quite off actually. Um yep. So that was for IP location stuff. And then there were a few fixes on the documentation. Um, this should have been headers, no header. Yeah, pretty much typos and stuff like that all fixed. Um, so there was another quite annoying bug. Um, I think most people wouldn't have ever run into it though. Um, let's see, front end Blade. The problem though was if you're using Blade and you didn't have Leaf Auth installed and you tried to use either of these functions like at auth, way to check if the user is authenticated, you would have kind of like an uncaught error. So that was the problem. Um, yes, most people wouldn't run into that issue because most people wouldn't try to use auth without, like actually installing Leaf Auth. Or at least I haven't really heard of anyone try to do that. But yeah, that was actually an error. And it's been fixed for both at auth and at guest. So if you don't have Leaf Auth installed, it will just default to false for auth and then true for guest. That's kind of the idea. So it's not really a major thing, but then it's kind of like a usability fit. Okay. Okay. So let's see. We've talked about okay, we really haven't talked about this, but the next major thing is caching. So this is quite a good one. Um, so this an application I've been working on for quite a little bit. We'll talk about this some other time. Yeah, but then I have quite a number of routes in here, as you can see. I'm making a lot of database queries, including some quite complex queries. Caching basically helps save a whole lot of time on the user's end. Um, Basically, you can take anything at all. It doesn't have to be a database query. It just needs to be can be anything at all. A string, a complex operation, anything. And you can just store it for a set amount of time or actually indefinitely. Um, so how it works is you leave install cache, and then from there you can just use this magic cache function. You can basically cache anything. So give it a query name. Sorry, you give it a key. That's what it will be saved by, kind of like an identifier for whatever operation this is. And then set a time for it. This is an hour, 60 seconds by 60 minutes. So this whole thing is in seconds. So 60, and then a function containing some simulated complex DB operation. So how this works is the first time this is called, the query would run. This function would be run. It would get a value and then return that to you. So that's on the first load. On the second load, or actually on whatever load that is, as long as the time the cache hasn't expired, it will just return it here. And then you notice with leaves caching, you don't have to check manually, like does this exist in cache? If it does, then we get it. If not, we do that. You just need to call cache this and then whatever function you need, and then it just works. If it exists in the cache, it returns it. If not, it calls the function. So that's how this works. So it basically does everything for you. If it exists, it caches. So if it exists, it just returns it to you. If not, it caches it. So that's the idea. It's kind of like one function to do everything for you. But then if you need any extra functionality, you have, like you can just call cache without any parameters, and then you get the whole cache object. I don't think people would kind of use this, but then yeah, it's just good to know it's available. If you need extra functionality, it's all there. um I just doubt people would kind of like use them. So you can save things permanently. You can get stuff from cache. Just be careful. If Just be careful to actually cache stuff before trying to call them. You can delete, you can flush, all of that stuff. The whole idea behind this particular cache library is we're giving you, like all the power you need to cache stuff without the complexity, which is why the cache function, does so much in one. It just takes away, the idea is to take away the complexity of it. So all you need to really worry about is what you are going to cache. Um, yeah, that's kind of like the idea. Um, I should have a few of those somewhere. Yeah, yeah. Sorry about. I should have a few good cases of caching somewhere. Yeah. So this is kind of like an API call using um leaf. I think leaf space stock library. It kind of like just makes an API call under the hood. And all that this does is we make an API call to some data, and we're pretty sure that's not going to change for a while. So we cache it for an hour, and then just return it from there. So that's kind of like an example of how to use it. Yeah. And then a little talk on over caching, under caching, that kind of thing. So um, you have everything you need, and it's really all up to you how you'd use it. Um, so that's about caching. It's pretty simple. We wanted to, just create something that just works with Leaf. So you leave install cache, you don't need to configure anything, it just works. So just call cache and then cache whatever you need. So there's no configuration, no setup. Yeah, so that's that's kind of what we're going for with caching on Leaf and Leaf MVC. What's this about? Okay, so this had to do with multi-database stuff. So you using let's find the database documentation. There we go. Okay. So there was no real documentation for Leaf MVC on how this works. So we just added this to kind of like guide you. So you use schema files to create your database tables, and then you use models to kind of like query them in your application. And then if you want kind of like queries that don't really fit into your models, you can just quickly write them like this. So this was just a little guide. It's more of a documentation thing because the features actually already existed. Um, there was more documentation for multiple database connections. So here's an example setup with like um, this was just copied right from my project. So this is kind of like production code. So the idea, this example has like four different databases. And then you can just switch between them. If you're from Laravel, you already know all of this stuff, but this was for folks who are not used to this. So you can use connection over here. And if you are using schema files, it's pretty much the same thing. You can, where's that? Database, multiple database connections. So you can just call connection with the name of the database connection you're using. Uh, so pretty much the same story there. So yeah, it was like more of a documentation thing, but this is new. Schema files didn't have, like you couldn't use connections on schema files. Now you can. And basically what it does is it allows you to migrate, um, like run migrations for specific databases. So again, in my project, I have four databases, probably overkill. I'm actually only using two, three actively. Um, Still probably overkill, but anyway. Um, yeah, so schema files allow me to migrate Um, so for instance, on my jobs, I am using my SQLite connection, which is pretty much this guy right here. It's an SQLite database, doesn't really do anything, it just sits there really. And yeah, basically every time I run this, it doesn't go to my actual database. It doesn't go to my default database. It goes to the SQLite database. So that's kind of how it works. That's really how it works. Um, by the way, this was created by Leaf. So if you are using um jobs on Leaf, Leaf just automatically generates this for you. So if you were wondering, yeah, this is done by Leaf. All I did was add my connection because I didn't want to run it on my default database. So yeah, it was mostly documentation for multiple database stuff. But yeah, we have that. We have the okay. Um, so next is leave billing. We initially had documentation for Stripe. Now there's documentation for Paystack as well. If you're using Paystack, which I am, I'm actually using both Stripe and Paystack. But then, yeah. So we have better documentation for Paystack as well. What items you can pass into, like different billing stuff. For billing callback, we kind of like merged everything into one. So it doesn't really matter what library you're using, it would work regardless. Um, yeah. But then some things are still Stripe only. Subscriptions technically work, but then there's still quite a few things to clean up over there. So, uh, yeah, we're going to kind of like put on hold till we get everything done. So for now, it's still just Stripe only. Okay. Let's see. Am I still good? Okay. I'm still good. I'm still good. And it's already been 49 minutes, almost an hour. Sheesh. Okay. Um, good thing is we are almost done. Um, okay. So that's about Paystack. On we have a new thing actually. This is actually a new thing. So totally new. And I really have no idea why I actually built this feature. Absolutely weird. So let's find middleware. There we go. Okay. So if you're using Leaf MVC, you probably already know about all of this stuff. You have class middleware, and then you have functional middleware. You probably don't use this if you're using Leaf MVC, but then you use stuff like this where you can kind of like um register middleware globally. If you're using any Leaf module, then there's probably like a good chance. I don't think it's in public. I think it's more like route. At least that's where I add mine. So you can have a bunch of middleware like this. So there's like auth middleware. Basically, if you're using any if you're using any Leaf module that has middleware, then you've probably used this before. Anyway, so going back to Leaf MVC, which we can find here. Um, we added a new kind of middleware, which is controller middleware. So the idea here is um, you can basically have middleware directly on your controller using underscore underscore middleware. So it kind of looks like a PHP magic function, but then this is not served by PHP, it's by Leaf. Um, so this is an example of it directly in my code. I have no idea why I used it. I think that was in like controller mobile. So my particular use case was my entire application, everything, something like the entire application. I have like all of these controllers. Everything runs on session auth, meaning leaf auth will check for a session and then like use that session to do everything. But then for an API, if I am building an API, which I am, I would want to use JWT's authentication. So this middleware was to just turn off session auth, to auth config session auth, and then like return. Since I'm disabling session auth, I wouldn't have the default session middleware. So I had to write kind of like my own auth middleware. So it checks for the user. If the user doesn't exist, it returns a 4-1 with some code. The funny thing is I could have actually gotten this to work with regular middleware. So that really begs the question of why this even existed. And I really do not remember. I was actually trying to remember when I was writing the documentation for this, but then yeah, I've, I've no memory of it. Anyway, cool thing is, unlike with your regular middleware, you don't have to register anything anywhere. So this is an example where I have like all of my mobile routes, and there's no middleware anywhere. However, every single route here is using this middleware because I registered this on a base controller. So um, I have this mobile namespace here, and every single controller in here is extending this controller class. And since I have the middleware here, it just works really. So that's a pretty good use case, I guess. And then it's kind of documented here. Everything you need is over here, probably. Um, yeah. So was it absolutely necessary? Not really, but then it gives you a new option to kind of abstract your code. So everything into your like route index as you would do if you are using like the function middleware. Okay, so that's the new magic middleware method from Leaf. Um, I'll probably like make an actual video on all of this stuff, but then this is just kind of walking you through the new changes. Um, Final feature, services. So basically what services do is they allow you abstract your code. So if you have a lot of code which you are going to repeat, you can just abstract it into a service. Again, if you're from a different framework like Laravel, you've probably used services before, but then they're kind of new to Leaf. But although they are new,